Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by Inside the Penguins, a proud affiliate of the Hockey News. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and we said on Tuesday that we were guaranteed to get some news. We ended up getting it on Wednesday. The Pittsburgh Penguins signed Drew O'Connor to a 2-year extension. We will discuss that a little bit later in the show because we did have a full breakdown on Penguins to go yesterday. If you want to go check that out, quick 10-minute breakdown of that and why the Penguins will get a second buyout period to potentially buy somebody out. I don't know, maybe somebody named Mikael Granlund. But we have a great show for you guys today. Obviously, talking all about forwards. We have top 6 winger projections, which we're going to get to in just a minute. We have Drew O'Connor. Is he primed for a breakout season after signing this 2-year contract? We'll discuss that a little bit later. And then NHL Network put out a projected lineup for the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll talk about that and if we believe that's what it should be heading into training camp in September. But Horwat, before we get into all of that, it is August. We had Evgeny Malkin's birthday earlier in the week. We have Sidney Crosby's birthday next week. I'm just itching to watch some actual hockey. It's the time of year where the NFL has training camps and everybody's getting excited for NFL season. And as a hockey fan, you just look at that and say, man, I can't wait for that to be us.
You're right. You can't wait, except this is the dead zone. This is the dead period, the good old dog days of summer, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
We're all excited for hockey. There's no doubt. But, I mean, you just got to make it through this month. If it is any worth for Penguins fans, at least to start the month. Kyle Dubas doesn't seem to be taking time off, much like August usually turns into vacation month for a lot of these hockey guys. But here we go. We at least for these first few days, we might have a president of hockey operations not at the cottage this time around. Not this year. He's got decisions to make with the lineup. He's got hires to maybe consider. He's got contracts to maybe toss around. He's got some. He still has a bit of a to-do list left. I mean, it's not long anymore. It's definitely shrinking. The to-do list for the team heading into this offseason has definitely shrunk quite a bit. And, a few pieces have been added to it. But, there's only a couple of notches left to take off of this list.
Yeah, he has certainly done the lion's share of the business for the offseason, but there's still business that remains. And we'll talk about that at a later date, obviously. But right now, let's get into our top 6 winger projections. Obviously, the Pittsburgh Penguins are a very top-heavy team, and they're going to rely on these 4 wingers specifically. Jake Guentzel, Rickard Rakell, Riley Smith, and Brian Rust. Last season, all 3 of these guys in that order is kind of how that went for them on point production. Jake Guentzel had 73 points, including 36 goals. Rakell had 60 points, 28 goals. Riley Smith with Vegas had 56 points, so a very similar season to Rickard Rakell in Pittsburgh. 26 of those 56 points were goals. And then, of course, Brian Rust had 46 points and 20 goals, which is widely considered a down year for him. Horwat, how do you see these secondary 3 when it comes to scoring this season? I would take Guentzel out of that because in my eyes, Jake Guentzel is kind of in a separate tier by himself because he's not quite superstar like Malkin and Crosby, but I do think he's a step above Rakell, Smith, and Rust.
Yeah, and how I see him is pretty much the same way I could see them last year. Rickard Rakell is going to fight for every minute he deserves to get on the first line, right? He's a solid player no matter where he plays, though. You need to, did I say third him at first? He's going to absolutely be, I don't want to say a monster on the forward core, but he's going to be an absolutely important piece because he can perform anywhere he is. We saw it all last year. First line, he's going to do well. Second line, he's going to do well. If you drop him to the third because you need to, screw it. He might do just fine. 60 points speaks for itself, especially, I mean, who cares who he's playing alongside with, Crosby or Malkin? The dude is likely going to continue playing again with one of those two. So that same production should be there. Rickard Rakell is not just above Brian Rust, who I want to get into, who just kind of needs to have himself a bounce back year. I know you discussed that before, but this is exactly what it needs to be. His new contract isn't new anymore. It's going into the second season, and point blank, he needs to play like it. I mean, whenever he signed it, we thought the it was a tidy piece of work by Ron Hextall. It was. The
Mhm.
money may have been a little high, the term may have been a little long, but those clauses coming in the first 3 and not the final 3 is kinda nice. Um, and pretty much Brian Russ needs to perform well enough to have us not take advantage of there not being clauses in going into 25, 26. I know that's a couple years down the line, but it's important for him to have a turnaround of a season. Sure, he's getting sure everyone's getting older, but it's important for him specifically, especially if he wants to continue bouncing between the first and second lines, to produce more than what he did. I mean, 46 points on paper isn't terrible, but there needs to be a little bit more than that this year.
Mhm. You would at least hope that he crosses the 55-point plateau this season.
For
If you're looking at Brian Rust, at least that's what I would look for. And I'll talk a little bit more about Brian Rust later, but I do want to go back to something you mentioned about Rickard Rakell. You say that he's probably the guy that you would go with to lead this trio in points. I say Rakell probably has the highest odds of being the leader. I think they're going to give him a little bit more playing time with Crosby and Gensel this season. Last year, everybody knows the underlying stats. He played half of his total ice time on that top line. So he's split between them and then Malkin, and then a little bit of line time is what he had with the remainder of his ice time at 5-on-5. But when he was with Crosby and Gensel, they controlled 56% of the shot attempts when on the ice, 59% of the scoring chances, 58% of the expected goals, and then 55% of the actual goals. And for those who aren't as familiar with advanced statistics, those are ridiculous statistics for an entire line, especially a line that goes up against the challengers that they do as the first line of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the fact that the Penguins were that good in Rakell's first full season with the Pittsburgh Penguins, I can only imagine what a second full season will do in a full off season of rest for all 3 of these guys, because everybody in the Penguins top 6 entered this offseason pretty much healthy. No major surgeries needed by any of them. So they didn't have to rehab at all this summer. They entered this next season on a fully healthy, clean slate, which is vastly important for this team.
Yeah, they weren't perfectly healthy. I think Rust had mentioned something that during cleanout day he busted something up during the how did he put it? During the useless game that didn't matter. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he said he suffered some sort of arm or hand injury. But I
Mhm.
mean, nothing serious. Clearly, no surgeries were needed, so he had the summer to work that off. I think Raquel may have
Had
been
something too.
he was lingering with something. It's what kept him from going to the World Championships. At least that's what he said. Um, and we know Crosby and Malkin. First of all, they probably wouldn't mention any injuries. We also weren't asking them about injuries.
Mhm.
We were, asking them how it felt to be missing the postseason. So they're coming into the season healthy. And also, we don't know the kind of bumps and bruises Riley Smith sustained along the way of winning the damn Stanley Cup.
Mhm.
But you know what? They all go away when you lift it. So uh, he's going to be an X factor too, I think, if we need to step into Riley
Mhm.
Smith. But no one, no one on this team, at least in the top 6, is dealing with recovering from injuries, severe ones
Yeah.
at least. We got some minor ones out of the way. By now,
Mhm.
you would assume they're already healed up. Um, so coming in healthy is going to be huge. We saw what it did for Crosby and Malkin this last season, having a fully healthy offseason, starting the season game 1, ready to go. Uh, especially for Malkin, it was a huge turning point for his season coming in healthy.
Mhm. I do think there's a non-zero chance that Riley Smith ends up leading that trio. Like you mentioned, obviously Raquel, and he is the odds-on favorite. I would assume that's the answer for most people. But when you look at Jason Zucker last season, playing in the position that we expect Riley Smith to play, Jason Zucker had 48 points and 27 goals. Riley Smith, I think, is much more of a playmaker than Jason Zucker was, so he can collect more assists in that role. But also, I think Riley Smith is more consistent as a goal scorer, right? We saw this from Jason Zucker, and we were like, oh, we've been waiting to see this. But Riley Smith has consistently shown that level throughout the years with the Vegas Golden Knights, and now playing alongside Evgeny Malkin. Not that he was playing alongside a bad center in Vegas either, but playing alongside Evgeny Malkin, I think that he is going to be able to score a lot of goals and also be able to set a lot of goals up with Malkin and Rust on that wing. So I really think between that and the fact that he likes to create offense on the penalty kill. That's something the Penguins haven't had the past couple of years. I think there's a non-zero chance that Riley Smith leads that trio, but I will say Raquel is probably the leader in the clubhouse for who I would imagine ends up actually taking it.
Yeah, and I like Smith as a more consistent goal scorer as well. I mean, we enjoyed what Jason Zucker brought to the Penguins last season, especially in terms of scoring goals. But if you look at the game log, I mean, there were some stretches there where there was not a
Yeah.
lot going on. It was more assists, more physicality, because we all know that even whenever he wasn't scoring goals, Jason Zucker was at least bringing something important and integral to the team. Um, but there were some stretches in there where he wasn't scoring, but then he'd pop off for like 6 and 8 games. It was something ridiculous, and he really did great for the team this season. Riley Smith, I just would have to pull his numbers up, but feels like there's going to be a bit more of a consistency there. Feels like there's definitely going to be more defensive mindset there, and if he's making plays, he's playing with 2 great guys to do it with. If Kenny Malkin's a great finisher, and Brian Rust needs to have that rebound season, and if giving him his finishing ability again with Riley Smith on his wing, on an opposite wing, should do wonders for him.
Now, here's when the projections come into play. I think all 3 of these forwards for the Pittsburgh Penguins will eclipse the 20-goal mark. But my hot take that I told you about off air before the show, that I was going to mention, I didn't tell you what it was, so I'm interested to see what your reaction is. I think Brian Rust finally eclipses 30 goals this season.
I can get with that. I would really like to see it as well. He's been so close a couple of times. I mean, his best possible season was cut short with COVID. The season following, had that been a full year, probably could have done it then as well. Yeah, I can see that finally happening. That would be exactly what the doctor ordered for him too. That's exactly what he needs to kind of aim for and shoot for, and then everything else will follow suit. 30 goals there. 10 extra goals gives us 10, would have given him 10 extra points as opposed to last season for 56 points, and you like that number.
Yeah, I like the over 55 for your 6th highest scoring top 6 forward. Like, that to me is a good mark to have. And when I look at Rust last season, he had a 9.5 shooting percentage. That's the lowest he's had since 2015-16, when he only played 41 games, because it was only his 2nd year ever playing in the NHL. So if there is a progression there, or at least getting back to the mean of where he's at, which is usually around 12%, 13%, not to mention the fact that he's going to spend more ice time at 5-on-5, considering 9% of his total ice time was spent shorthanded last year, which was a career high. I do see where this could potentially turn into a 30-goal season for Brian Rust. I also think the big factor is, you mentioned it, he just doesn't need to do something we've never seen before. He just needs to go back to how he played the 3 years prior to signing that contract, because the year you mentioned that was cut short due to COVID, he was on an 82-game pace of 42 goals. Not just 30, but a 40 goal scorer that year. And the other 2 years, if he played 82 games, he would have been over 30 goals as well. So to get back to that level is not something out of the realm of possibility. It would be massively important for the Pittsburgh Penguins to get him back to that level. And I think it would help him, like you just mentioned, get to that milestone, or that touchstone of 55 points.
Yeah, it'd be a good watermark to hit.
Yes.
Good.
100%.
Yeah. That's where it needs to be. That 55 right there, especially if it does end up being the, like you put it, the 6th highest scoring winger or forward on your team. I mean, if that's your 6th, then you have a damn good roster that is producing and spreading the production out, because, like we discussed before, last season's numbers were Crosby at 93, Malkin at 83, Gensel at 73. First of all, consistency is key. Then Raquel at 60, and a quick drop off all the way to Jason Zucker at 48. So you had 4 guys doing a ton of the heavy lifting. Jason Zucker was in there doing good work. We're not denying anything Jason Zucker did, but you feel like he produced more than he actually did, right? Because when you think about the season Zucker had and you realize he only had 48 points, it doesn't seem like that, right? It seems like there was a lot more. It was how important all those points were.
And the fact that he was a goal scorer too. He wasn't as much of a playmaker last season, and he didn't really play very much on the power play.
Right. Yeah. I mean, only 2 power play goals to count into that. So it's, but 5 game winners. I mean, he had the important timing goals too. And then Rust at 46, Crystal Tang at 41. Then you start getting into defenseman talk, and that's not where we need to be. So it's up to Brian Rust to have that turnaround season. Riley Smith will
Mhm.
produce, assuming he can remain at about his level. We need to really see what he can still do on this team.
Mhm.
Raquel has a chance to play again phenomenally wherever he goes. So it's going to be a good season, at least for these forwards. The bottom six will need its own help. We'll discuss that at a later date. But for right now, I
Mhm.
mean, this top six should be okay, assuming the right guys have the right seasons.
Yeah, and I know we didn't discuss Jake Gensel very much, but he is in a tier of his own, and that's something that we're going to have to discuss in a separate episode down the line because he's entering a very important season. He is a guy that has scored 40 goals twice in his career. He scored 30 goals, I believe, another 3 times or 2 times, and he's entering a contract year. I mean, will the Pittsburgh Penguins look to extend him during the season? Are they going to let him play it out? And if they let him play it out, is he going to go out there and put up 40 to maybe a career high when he gets to 41, 42, or maybe even 45? So it's going to be an interesting year for the Pittsburgh Penguins top six. And I know a lot of people are not excited about the offensive prospects of this entire team, but looking at the top six, it should be exciting to watch those two lines specifically play the game. But we're going to take a quick break. When we return, let's talk about one of those bottom six forwards that just signed a new contract. The ink is yet to be dried on that contract for Drew O'Connor. We'll discuss whether or not we believe he's primed for a breakout season in 2023. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com, a proud affiliate of the Hockey News, which is way up over there by Horwat in the corner
That
there. If
one.
you're watching us, there we go. Thank you, Horwat. The massive pointer. What it was, Vanna White of the Tip of the Iceberg. There is Nick Horwat. But obviously, biggest news of the week so far is that Drew O'Connor signed a 2-year contract worth $950K on the salary cap. He avoids salary arbitration. Horwat, I gave my thoughts yesterday on Penguins to go, but you have yet to give yours, so I will leave the floor to you. What do you think of the Drew O'Connor contract and the fact that the team avoided salary arbitration by settling with this contract?
The dollar amount is about where I expected it to be. That was kind of the easy notice of, because every time this contract or this thought was brought up of what exactly could Drew O'Connor demand. It's not like he didn't have a great season. He did. It was his first full asterisk season uh, playing at the NHL level. It was his first full time gig. I mean, it's not like he produced overwhelmingly great offensively for the Penguins. It wasn't like he was fully noticeable defensively. I mean, I'm sure he was in some aspects, but there was something about it that was still, can you really demand, the sun and the moon? Obviously, like I said in the last episode, he's not going to be the one demanding Troy Terry's 8 million. Ended up getting 7, by the way. How about that?
Jesus.
Um, he's not going to be able to demand the high dollar amount. I genuinely, even with an arbiter, did not know if he was going to make more than a million, maybe 1,250,000. But I mean, $900,000, 925 is the total number here.
Yeah.
Is not that's about what I expected. 2 years is even better. We like having him around for that extra season. Um, and like I said, even if it went to arbitration, I don't know exactly how much more the Penguins would have maybe have had to have spent. Don't
Mhm.
know what dollar amount they started at either. But hey, you know what? We got the deal done. It took some learning. It took some rereading and fact checking with certain people. We do get that buyout window.
Mhm.
And that is really, I mean, Drew O'Connor ended up being a pivotal piece to this offseason. Who would have thunk it? So we'll see where things go. The number itself, though, the contract, you cannot complain about. You cannot complain about a contract under $1 million for a player who is 25 and only has played. He played 46 games last season.
I
You
believe he's
can't
played
complain about
77 or 78 games or something like that in his career.
you cannot complain about a contract like that, especially if he's got a great chance of making the fourth line out of camp and being, um, more than what he just was. 78 in
Mhm.
a career, 17 total points. I mean, you know what? He's got a great chance to make a name for himself as a depth forward in the NHL.
Yeah, it's a big season for Drew O'Connor. I know that he has the protection now of being under a 2-year contract, but this is really going to be his first kick at the can of saying, hey, I am a full-time NHL player. If he's able to make the team out of camp is one thing, and if he's able to stick with the NHL team the entire season, which is something he has yet to do in his young career. So, Horwat, the next question that brings me to is this. What would you consider a quote breakout season for O'Connor?
It's hard to predict production when it comes to the bottom six because you never really are sure of what they should put up. I mean, like I just read off his career numbers. He's played 78 career games, 8 goals, 9 assists, 17 points. How's just that? Double up your career totals if you know in any sort of way. You don't have to hit 78 games played just because being on the fourth line, injuries, this, that, and the other. The 78 games may not happen, but if you're able to pin up 17 to 20 points, I don't see why that wouldn't be considered a breakout season for him, especially if he's coasting on the fourth line all year. If he is producing over that level, obviously you have to bump him up if he has that sort of pedigree. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Is that about where he should be, about what his career totals are now?
I think you're in the realm of where he needs to be for a breakout, but in my opinion, it's not all encompassing with points for this.
Correct.
For this, I think what I mentioned a little bit ago, if he stays at the NHL level all season, that's one of the prongs to me that is important to whether or not it's a breakout for his particular position because he spent 20 games last year at the AHL level. So first and foremost, he needs to stick in the NHL, maybe not playing every game, but at the very least, staying on the NHL roster from the beginning to the end of the season is one thing. And I think another important factor to whether or not he's a breakout candidate is can he become a constant on the Penguins' third line by the end of the season? No, he doesn't have to break out right at the beginning, right out of camp and be a third liner for the Penguins. But by the end of the season, is he able to progress? Is he able to show enough to the coaching staff to where they trust him to bump him to that third line? Is he able to get the success offensively where they're trusting him to bump up to the third line? Is he going to be able to work well with a Lars Eller or with whoever else is on that third line right now? I mean, with an Alex Nylander, with a Jeff Carter, is he able to actually get something out of Jeff Carter at the age of 38 and produce offensively with Carter? So I think that's another important factor. And then to get to the points that you mentioned, you said if he's able to hit his marks that he has on his career now, which is you said 8 goals, 17 points in 78 games, right?
Yep. Yep.
I want to see him score 10 to 12 goals.
There you
That's
go.
what I would consider a breakout. Get to that double digit mark and then surpass it a little bit and then finish around 25 points. I know that's not earth shattering breakout star, but for the Penguins bottom six and for Drew O'Connor where he's at coming into this season, I think that's what I would consider a breakout for him.
Yeah, and it's easy just to kind of spit numbers out because it's usually what a lot of people will look at when it comes to quote unquote breakout seasons. We look a little deeper, and I agree with you on all of those things. Just staying at the NHL level, being bumped up to the third line if need be, and just being a consummate defensive mindset forward. I like all of it. I mean, we also just need a bottom six that can find production in unexpected areas. That's kind of a big reason why you want him to be able to produce as well. I mean, last season we enjoyed Ryan Paling a whole hell of a lot. I mean, despite his injuries, he only put up 7-7-14, clean 14 points.
Mhm.
Um, if you want to throw Josh Archibald on that conversation, we liked what he could do. You know, being the I don't want to say a pest, but just being a I don't know. He threw he
He
being
was a
a
pest.
wrecking, yeah, being a pest and a wrecking ball. That's kind of the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
He put up a clean 12 points of 6 and 6. So
Mhm.
Drew O'Connor has to pass those guys when it comes to production.
Mhm.
There's no doubt about that. Assuming he plays more than Brian Paling only played 53, Josh Archibald only played 62. Assuming he can play more games than that, he'll definitely
Mhm.
have to pass those numbers. Just to, like I said, make sure this bottom six has some production under its belt because it needs it.
Mhm.
Um,
R
and everything else will just kind of flow along with it. We know he's got those. Drew O'Connor has those assets to play defensively and hopefully bring something out, especially if he's playing with Jeff Carter. He's gonna have to bring something out of Jeff Carter for this final year of his, possibly the final year of his career.
Mhm.
There's a lot riding on Drew O'Connor's season, a lot riding on Jeff Carter's season. If those two can work well together, hell yeah.
Yeah, and throw Lars Eller into that mix as well. I think Drew O'Connor, to me, has a higher offensive upside, at least at this point of his career, than you saw Josh Archibald. I mean, Josh Archibald last season, you know exactly what you were going to get from him. You weren't expecting all that much offense from him. You were expecting exactly what you got. And honestly, it's a good allocation of money. Is, hey, listen, we're going to pay you to do this. He went out and he did that. It was a good deal for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Ryan Poehling was interesting because I do think that Ryan Poehling had more to give offensively, but the injuries clouded it. What was the injury? Did he play through injuries? It was a weird situation, and the Pittsburgh Penguins just cleaned their hands and wiped their hands of it this summer. I still think that Drew O'Connor has a higher offensive upside that he showed. I'm not sure if I'd say more than Ryan Poehling because I just not sure what Ryan Poehling was, but I think just specifically speaking on Drew O'Connor, the offensive side is something that I think there's more for him to give, and I'd like to see him play with more offensive talent than what he did last season, right? So again, playing with a Lars Eller, maybe playing with an Alex Nylander, or playing with potentially as a center with maybe like a Valtteri Puustinen on his left side, or maybe an Andreas Johnsson on his left side. I think that would certainly be interesting. And yesterday I said that I talked about Drew O'Connor on Penguins to Go. We actually had a comment on our YouTube channel from Damon Gomes. He said, "Do you feel he will be added to the penalty kill, thus giving him more of a role and more of a responsibility?" That's the interesting thing to me. Can you teach him? Can you get him into that role? Because if he only plays 5-on-5, he can only go so far as his actual impact on the team. Not that he's not going to have one, but I think it would be very interesting and very good for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I was looking for a better word. There was no better word in my brain, I guess. Very good for the Pittsburgh Penguins and a good part of his evolution if he was able to add that to his repertoire.
Yeah, from what I can kind of remember, um, he was at least taking drills in uh, penalty killing at the end, toward the end of last season during his
Mhm.
time with the team. I don't remember if he was getting playing time there though. I just do remember
He
him.
didn't. I'll look it up real quick, but I don't think he got very much, if any, playing time on the penalty kill.
Yeah, and take this from what you will. The daily face-off line combinations already don't have him as part of either the power play or the penalty kill. He is just kind of sitting on the fourth line. Uh, but then again, you have to remember we brought in guys that are going to be keys to the penalty kill in Matt Nieto, in Nola Chari, and Lars Eller to a degree. So it'll be interesting to kind of see where Drew O'Connor sits in terms of the special teams.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, we still have a big old couple of moves that might need to be made that make big swaps when it comes to the special teams,
Mhm.
i.e., daily faceoffs current the second power play unit for the Penguins is centered by Jeff Carter with Mikhail Granlund on the point and along with Jeff Petrie. I mean, those three players right there might just get scooped right off of the power play unit if a certain trade happens. So who knows
Yeah.
exactly where you know power plays and penalty kills stand. But Drew
Mhm.
O'Connor playing the penalty kill, I don't mind that either. They've already
Yeah.
started him practicing there. Time to
Mhm.
put that into game form. You have a preseason and training camp to work on that.
Mhm.
If he already has a bit of the leg under him for that, it's already a head start.
Yeah, he did end up playing 25 minutes, a little over 25 minutes of shorthanded ice time last season. So they have put him out there in those situations. I would like to see it become a bigger part of his game because, as you mentioned, and I'm sure the reason that Damon asked is you don't really remember him being a penalty killing forward for
Right.
the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, if you look at Jay Fresh's player card, penalty killing is not available. Like there was no statistics available. He doesn't have a percentile because he hasn't played enough time in that over his career. The seasons before that, he had, I believe, a little over 1 minute is what it said on there. The season before that, and then his rookie season, he had, I think, 3 total minutes of shorthanded ice time. So he had the most penalty kill time last season that he has in his career, 25 minutes. We'll see if that obviously progresses, and hopefully, if he plays all 82 games, that number gets much higher. And I agree with the YouTube commenter that he would probably be penalty kill too, because you have guys like Riley Smith, guys like Nola Chari, guys like I believe Matt Nieto can also play the penalty kill that will probably eat up more time than O'Connor.
Yeah, here is about to say. Here's also how unupdated the there's Riley Smith. The daily faceoff thing is though that second power play unit would normally have P.O. Joseph on it.
Mhm.
Riley Smith might be killing some penalties with us as well. It's this whole thing will get updated soon enough. We're just kind of using this as a base
Yep.
for all conversations.
Yep, exactly. So I'm interested to see what Drew O'Connor is able to do this season. I really am. I think that after signing that contract, especially the way in which he did it, obviously he was going to take the team to arbitration. He felt he deserved more than what they were offering him. It puts a little bit more of a spotlight on you. I mean, and not as much as NFL contract situations, NBA contract situations, but that puts a little bit more of a spotlight on you. I mean, we've done a Drew O'Connor segment each of the last two episodes. I had a full Penguins to go yesterday on Drew O'Connor. That's 3 days in a row that we've talked about this guy, and honestly, I do think that he does have more offensive upside than he's shown throughout his career, and I think the progression has been reassuring throughout his first 3 years, and it's gonna be fun to see what he's able to do in year number 4.
For sure, it's going to be. It's going to be a big year for him. Anytime you enter a new contract and that first season hits, that's usually all automatically a pretty big year for you.
Yeah, of course. So what we're going to do is take one quick break, and then NHL Network did put out yesterday, because of the O'Connor news, a projected forward lineup. We're going to go through that, talk about what we like, what we don't like, and if we think there's anything that's actually going to be different versus what we'd like to see when it comes to Pittsburgh Penguins training camp. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and you can also find us anywhere you get your podcasts from. Horwat, obviously NHL Network was talking about the only thing that happened across the NHL yesterday news-wise, which was the Pittsburgh Penguins signing Drew O'Connor to a 2-year deal worth $925,000 per season. So they put out a projected forward lineup for the Pittsburgh Penguins now that there are no more RFAs to deal with for Kyle Dubas and the Pittsburgh Penguins front office. Here's what they had as the projected lineup for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Gensel, Crosby, Raquel is the top line.
Mm-hmm.
Riley Smith, Evgeny Malkin, and Brian Rust as the second line. I don't think there's any surprises there.
Nope, it's about what it's probably going to be.
Mikael Granlund, Lars Eller, and Jeff Carter as the third line.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little scary. But the fourth line, just to round it out before discussing, Drew O'Connor, Nola Chari, and Matt Nieto. The bottom six, oof. That's first and foremost. Do you agree that that's the likeliest lineup as of now?
As of now, I believe so. Yeah, that's also exactly what I know. We just mentioned it. This is exactly what sits on Daily Faceoff's website.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty, I'd say, pretty accurate to what we have because you just signed guys like Lars Eller to a couple years at $2 million a year, I believe, without double checking. Matt Nieto and Nola Chari. They're going to sit on your fourth line. Lars Eller already discussed playing the third line. There's not much room for maneuverability, because you're not going to sign those guys and immediately be like, all right, you're healthy scratched. It's just not happening. They are solid NHL players. They have that status. They have a more solid lineup spot than guys like Drew O'Connor do, or any of the other signings that might just have to coast through healthy scratches or the minor leagues to start the year. So far as this lineup looks, that just might be what it has to be. Jeff Carter being on the third line is the scariest part of it. And mostly we say that mostly because Mikael Granlund is TBD. We'll see how all that goes. But otherwise, though, that's about what I'd expect from the current list of players we have right now.
Yeah, I would assume that entering training camp, if all stays the same, obviously Granlund is the big factor there when it comes to looking at, is he going to get bought out between Saturday and Monday? That's the first thing. And secondly, obviously, is the Erik Karlsson trade. Does Drew O'Connor get included in that? Does somebody else get included in that on the forward side. And that obviously shakes up what you would see here from the 12 names that we just discussed. But I do think that going into camp, this is probably how Mike Sullivan ends up penciling in the lineup.
Mhm.
Whether or not there's room to move, obviously there's not in the top six. Like, you're not touching that top six. You might switch something around if Raquel and Malkin start to show glimmers of something, or if Rust and Crosby, you want to make sure that that's the line. Again, we mentioned it in the first segment. We would prefer to see Raquel at least to start the season, and
Mhm.
see if that magic continues from last year. But looking at the bottom six, the only main thing I would change, even if Mikael Granlund is on this team, and I do it with gritted teeth because I'm not sure how Mikael Granlund on a fourth line would actually work out. I would like to see Drew O'Connor get an opportunity to play with Lars Eller. I would like to
Mhm.
see what that pairing would look like, and I'd like to see what Drew O'Connor would look like if you gave him an elevated and more important role on the third line.
Yeah, and that's kind of a lot of what we discussed this
Mhm.
past. Yeah, it's um this what was I trying to say? Discussed in the last segment.
Yeah.
It's we want to see what he can bring this upcoming season. It's going to be an important year for him with the new deal. I mean, maybe wanted more than what he got. Well, he's got to prove why he deserves that more in an upcoming
Mhm.
contract. It's
Yeah.
going to be important for him to, at least like I mentioned, have a good offensive year as well as your stay-at-home casual stuff. Uh, the breakout year is going to be important for him, and that will involve him being bumped to the third line. We don't know where Jeff Carter sits specifically on this team. For what it's worth,
Mhm.
Matt Nieto might be able to pull off a third line role, and that doesn't sound totally terrible. But a lot of moving and shaking will have to happen for that first. So Drew O'Connor starting on the third line doesn't sound like a totally terrible idea. But it's interesting. This bottom six is definitely reloaded, but just reloaded in a weird and awkward and not unfortunate, but just a interestingly unfortunate way.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Is there any other changes that you would make? Like, if it wasn't just what you expect and you'd like to make a change, is there anything else you do to this lineup? I mean, doesn't even have to be the O'Connor for Granlund switch that I did. Is there anything to this lineup, maybe adding somebody that's not in this lineup that you would like to see get the opportunity out of camp?
I mean, we need a whole fifth line. Like it's
Yeah.
because I feel like Vinny Hinostroza and Johansson, Andreas Janssen, sorry, both deserve at least cracks at it, at least cracks at the NHL lineup. Just trying to, and then we're having this whole conversation, not even mentioning that Alex Nylander's still here.
Hmm.
Like there's an entire fifth line that deserves a chance at cracking the NHL roster, and then there's still Radim Zahorna floating around. Oh yeah, Valtteri Puustinen, Sam Poulin. Oh, now we need a whole sixth. We have a forward logjam, and I mean that's casually going to happen during the off season. But this is a bit more of a. It feels like there's plenty of people with NHL experience and with NHL caliber talent. This isn't so much of a. There's a couple of roster battles here and there. Someone might
Yeah.
get this. No, this slowly turned into, oh, we have to like make tough decisions.
Yeah.
And
There's good.
also, yep, go ahead.
I was going to say there's going to be competition.
There's gonna be real competition.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I wanted to bring up is Sullivan needs to pull plugs quickly this season. You have a variety of options.
Yeah.
Someone's not pulling their weight in certain ways. Quickly pull the plug. Have Dubas get on the horn and call up Zahorn if you need to. You got other guys floating around down there. I mean, you
Hmm.
have your prospects that are ready to make the jump, as well as guys, like I said, like Hinostroza, Zahorna, and Janssen that
Hmm.
uh, have NHL experience and can continue to cut it.
Yeah. Now here's an interesting amalgamation of a bottom six that I had just thought up. If Granlund does indeed go, let's play that hypothetical right now. If Granlund does indeed go, whether that be in the trade for Eric Carlson, that is still, day. We changed the month. It makes it a little bit more difficult. Day
Yeah.
34 of the Eric Carlson watch, or if he is bought out in the next 72 to 94 hours. What would a bottom six of O'Connor, Eller, and Alex Nylander is your third line, Achari, Nieto, and Carter make you feel like? I mean, that
Oh,
fourth line is very interesting. But honestly, I think that's a better option than what NHL Network and Daily Faceoff have up there now.
correct. Yeah, anything that involves Nylander is going to immediately be a boost to the system. I think. I mean, in reality, it sucks that we still have Jeff Carter sitting on this lineup. I mean, he's going to have his role. We understand that he's going
Yeah.
to be here. He's at least going to start in the lineup. Man, this is the point that I'm making with Sullivan needs to have a short leash this year. The healthy scratch, and truthfully, you have so many options that are A, younger, B, probably faster. I don't know about better in certain areas of the ice, but at least it's something fresh, faster, and younger, and a little bit more hungry to crack the NHL. Jeff Carter's on his way out. This is probably the last year he's going to play in the NHL.
Mhm.
Whereas I don't even know. Like Andreas Janssen would like a new role in the NHL to really push and stay for uh, into his 30s as he's only
Mhm.
28. Sam Poulin would probably like to crack the NHL roster again and stay there.
Mhm.
Same about Terry Pusanen. You got to have the quick leash, a quick hook. Just that's enough of that. We're going to try something else, especially this
Yeah.
season. It's a pivotal year for guys like Malkin, Crosby, Letang, who are, again, not getting any younger toward the
Yeah.
end of their career. You need as many wins as you can to get back into the postseason. If your main goal is to win one more Stanley Cup with this core,
Mhm.
you can't have anchors pulling you down. Not
Mhm.
calling Jeff Carter an anchor. He obviously has his uses. Mike Sullivan believes that. Uh, but if things aren't going right, you have a plethora of options.
So many options that Horwat just keeps dropping stuff. Like he can't even hold on to things. He's so excited. His hands are just
Trying to take
all over it.
notes, and it's just not going well.
Exactly. Well, let's finish the episode with this, Horwat. Who is one wild card to make the roster? I know it doesn't happen as often in the NHL where somebody comes out of nowhere and they're just so unbelievably good that you weren't expecting them to be that way and they crack a roster, especially one seemingly as set as the Pittsburgh Penguins, where there might only be one or two spots available. But who is one player that you think could do that in training camp?
I mean, Alex Nylander wouldn't be a shock. We know what he can bring. I think the real surprise would probably be Andreas Janssen finding his way in there,
Mhm.
especially in a winger's room that's pretty full. I mean, that Andreas Janssen cracking the line would probably mean Jeff Carter is getting healthy scratch to start the year, which doesn't seem likely, but that would likely be the most shocking. And he has, of the names that I keep mentioning, has the best chance to crack in.
Mhm.
Right? He's probably got the best skill out of that group and the most experience without doubt, and has had the highest production in the NHL before. Uh, I would say that would probably be the most shocking. Alex Nylander cracking it wouldn't be a surprise. It would just be kind of a, well, where's he fitting? Who's moving out where? It's
Mhm.
like we mentioned, there's a lot of shuffling that still needs to happen here.
Yeah, I think if Granlund goes, Nylander's the first name to be put into the projected lineup by everybody. But I
Yeah.
think if I'm looking at one wild card to make the roster, and you know he's my guy, and I always mention him when we get to this, but I think it's Valtteri Puustinen. You know, he
Mhm.
wasn't called up at all last season, but he did start camp last year practicing with Crosby and Gensel. Like, what was that? And if you didn't have high expectations, if you didn't like him as much, then why would you even test that out? Right? Especially getting ready for a season last year that you knew you needed to have, Ricardo Raquel get some ice time with Sidney Crosby because they had only played so many minutes together. You wanted to get that chemistry going. But why spend the first, I believe it was at least the first 2 days. It might have been the entire first week. I'm a little foggy. I'd have to go back and look through my notes from when I was there. But why spend a significant or at least a noticeable amount of time with him practicing with your first line if you didn't believe there was something there? Now, he still needs to come in and prove it. He still needs to come in and make the roster. He still needs to come in and impress the coaching staff and the general manager and everybody else that way. But we're talking about the guy that led the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins last year in scoring.
Mhm.
You need more scoring in your bottom six. He's going to provide that. The only question to me becomes, is he defensively responsible enough? And we'll have to ask Nick Hart. Hopefully we get him on after our quick break in August. Does he play or does he show defensive responsibility in his game, or is that a weak spot? And will that affect him trying to make the jump to the NHL? Because as we've noted many times on this show, Kyle Dubas has had defense in mind when creating this bottom six.
And Mike Sullivan just always has defense in mind, period.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's going to be a big part of him getting a call at all, is if he has rounded out that defensive game. I mean, that was a huge reason why Sam Poulin didn't get called up for a long time. He needed to work on that. It was one of the big things that he needed to zero in on and improve before he could even step foot in the AHL, let alone the NHL.
Yeah.
In this system. So, yeah, again, as long as that defensive game is up for Pusin, maybe he has a better chance. But, man, just the way Kyle Dubas has made an influx of just depth forwards after depth forwards after depth forwards. Who knows where it all goes? Regardless, it's going to make the AHL team a lot more attractive. It's going to make the camp battles a lot more attractive. And like I said, Mike Sullivan now has plenty of options to quickly pull plugs on guys.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season at forward, especially going into training camp, because like you mentioned, the competition between, is Puustinen going to be able to jump the hurdles placed in front of him of, Vinny Hinostroza, Andreas Janssen, even a guy like Matt Nieto. Like Matt Nieto could be a healthy scratch at one point if he's not succeeding. And could somebody like Puustinen or Nylander jump Nieto? Yeah, it's possible. I wouldn't say that his spot is guaranteed in the lineup. I would say maybe on the roster is probably guaranteed. But if he doesn't outperform some of these guys, like if he doesn't outperform Drew O'Connor, and it comes down to the two of them, the Penguins should keep Drew O'Connor. Now, here's the difference is we could have this discussion in another week, and it'd be completely different. The important thing is going to be this weekend. Does Mikael Granlund get bought out? Do the Penguins get $4 million in space, which at the moment would only create, $800,000 surplus in cap because they're $3.2 million over the NHL salary cap at the moment with 24 players on the roster. But how does that shake things up? That's something we'll have to discuss at a later date. But Horwat, any last thoughts on the forward lineup before we turn this episode off?
I don't have much. It's just you'll see more thoughts come out over the next few weeks from us. I'm sure it's going to be interesting. Get ready for the slow month and a lot of discussions of things we don't know anything about quite yet. Things could still change. And it's a matter of having a quick leash, quick pull.
What's going to happen? We're going to get to our breaks. We're going to both be out of pocket, away from everything that we can do. And they're going to drop the Erik Karlsson trade. And we're going to be like, well.
Oh, I'll find time to do stuff. Don't worry.
We'll be a little bit late on a reaction to that if that happens. But regardless, we hope you tune in. Make sure you like, share, subscribe everywhere you get your podcast, including on YouTube if you like to watch the video version. You can check us out at InsideThePenguins.com. Writings from both Horwat and myself, as well as a fantastic writer and Jacob Puntori. We've had him on the show. We'll have him on the show again. But that is it for this episode of The Tip of the Ice-Burgh. We'll see you guys next time.